Now, you might have noticed that I am not Professor McGregor. Might have escaped your attention. I'm very sorry he can't be here today. He's perfectly fine, but it wasn't appropriate for him to come. So it's fallen to me. I'm Catherine. For those of you that don't know me, to introduce you, welcome you all to the Parliamentary Reception for National Salt Awareness Week 2020. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly do the thank yous so we can get on with the rest of the meeting, but they are very important thank yous. Dr. James Davis is our MP who's sponsoring our reception. He's currently in the budget, but hopefully will be along a little bit later on. Our brilliant lineup of speakers who will all be introduced in turn. Very importantly, our organisers who've done such an amazing job. As you can imagine, it's been a bit of an effort, particularly this week, trying to work out exactly what's going on. But a special thanks to Sonia, Zoe, Mara, Sheena, Emma, our PR David, and of course to Graham as well. All our volunteers and helpers, everyone at Cash and Queen Mary University that's been supporting us. Also to our creative folk at Libertine who've done our posters, and also our scientific members for their ongoing support. We have got some stands today from Low Salt and Smart Salt who are talking about salt reduction solutions, and also Blood Pressure UK who are taking blood pressure measurements, so please do stop by and say hello afterwards if you haven't before. It makes a great photo opportunity if nothing else. The event is being videoed and photographed, particularly for those that aren't going to be able to make it today, so let us know if you're not happy to be shown in that, but it'll be sent around after the event. We also have got a brilliant video, so our same videographer here, Luqman, did a fantastic video for us for Salt Awareness Week, which we'll send around afterwards, which we would love if you could share widely. It really is really good little video. And if you want to tweet, please do so. The hashtag is Salt Awareness Week. So it is great. Well done to all of you for making it here today. Very impressive, shows strength and courage, I think. A lot of elbow bumping going on, but really, you know, it's sad that more people couldn't make it, because this is really our opportunity just to thank you all for all the work that you do and the journey that you've been on in salt reduction, and we really know that it's a bit of a thankless task. You're not always the most popular person in the room if you reduce salt in your food, but it's so important, so thank you for all of that as well. As Graham's not here, you have a copy of the release, which you have hopefully seen already, and you will have seen some of the responses, which were less than brilliant from people mentioned in the survey. Hopefully there'll be some more positive responses to come from it, but really I have to echo what Graham has said. He's asked me to pass on a very important message to you all. You can guess what it is? More action needed. So with that in mind, I should pass you over to Professor Tim Lang, who, delighted, has come to chair our panel for us today. So please think of any questions as you go for the whole panel as well, which you'll have afterwards. Tim is the Professor of Food Policy at City University's Centre for Food Policy, where he researches the role of policy in shaping and responding to the food system. His current research interests are well known, but sustainable diets, the meaning of modern food security, and the implications of Brexit for the food system. So without any further ado, I shall pass it over to Tim. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and I think we should all clap for Catherine, actually.
It's fantastic. I'm actually very honoured to be here. I was delighted, genuinely delighted to be asked to do this. And I put on my best suit for Graham. I just would like that recorded, you know, because he's always so smartly dressed. I thought, what do I wear? Do I come in my usual T-shirt? No. Suit, and he's not here, so I just want it recorded. I'm wearing a suit for this year. Okay, I feel better now. Okay, now look, seriously. Has everyone seen the release of the survey today? Lots of nods. Even for me, who's on the advisory group, I thought this was an extremely good one. And I liked it. I've said it to Catherine. I think it's great that it's got the, not just saying everyone's terrible, but saying these people are better than those and these people are really terrible. So there was actually a very nuanced message, I thought, that was extremely helpful and really good. So well done, the team. We've got 3 talks, and if James Davis comes in, he'll be another. Could drop in from the completely unimportant budget. I mean, why he's there rather than here, I don't know. But we're going to go through. Have you all got the list? We've got Juliet Bouverie, Chief Executive of the Stroke Association. She's going to go first, then Amanda Ursell on Juliet's right, and then Joe Nicholas from Public Health England. And so we'll do that in turn, and then we'll come back and take questions and chip in. Are you all happy for people want to wave and ask a question? You're on.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Juliet Bouverie. I'm Chief Executive of the Stroke Association. And I'm just going to talk about the link between stroke prevention and SALT. So I don't know how much any of you know about stroke. Have any of you been directly or indirectly affected by someone in your family who's had a stroke, or a friend or neighbour? Hands up. Yeah, probably half the room. Yeah, so strokes are frighteningly prevalent. There's over 100,000 strokes every year, 1.2 million people living with the impacts of a stroke. And stroke strikes in an instant. It's a brain attack. And it happens without any warning at all. And it's the single biggest cause of adult disability in the UK. So we have a lot of stroke survivors who not only have the visible impacts of a stroke, quite often paralysis down one side, problems with mobility and balance, but also an awful lot of invisible effects relating to fatigue, cognition, emotions, sight, etc., etc. Now, the thing that a lot of people don't know about stroke is that actually evidence shows that 90% of strokes are actually preventable. And the main risk factor for a stroke is hypertension. And hypertension causes around 50% of all strokes in the UK. And the statistics that we have show that we've got over 9.5 million people in the UK walking around with diagnosed hypertension, but too few of them are being appropriately managed. And then there's another nearly 6 million people wandering around with undiagnosed hypertension. So that's a population of nearly 15 million people who are at risk of having a stroke, and sadly stroke causes a quarter of all deaths in the UK, so that is a real reason for stroke prevention being taken seriously. So what's the link between hypertension and salt intake? Well, we know that excessive salt intake, particularly sodium chloride, increases your risk of hypertension and therefore your risk of a stroke. And it's a major contributor. And what we know from compelling data from Public Health England, and I'm sure we'll come on to this later, is that actually if we can reduce salt in food by as little as 1 gram a day, it could prevent up to 1,500 premature deaths each year and save the NHS over £140 million annually. There is a massive economic argument for promoting the benefits of reduced salt intake. So as a charity at the Stroke Association, we fund research, services and campaigns to help people to rebuild their lives after stroke. We support all efforts and public health initiatives and campaigns to reduce salt in diet. We have stroke coordinators who do home visits with stroke survivors and their families, and they consistently repeat the message that one of the ways to avoid a second stroke is to adopt a healthier lifestyle, and that includes reducing salt in your diet. So it is a key message, but we would like that message to be heard louder by more people, and I think there's a real role for health professionals to make every contact count and to ensure that that key message is communicated. So we're very, very supportive of the efforts that all of you guys are taking to raise this important subject, and we will play our part as we go forwards.
Very good, thank you. You can all clap.
Lots of questions arising, certainly I'd just like to flag, but not ask you now. Regional disparities, I'm thinking of the policy agenda that's emerging at present. We could maybe come back to that. Huge regional disparities on stroke incidence in Britain. And here we've got a government debating the budget to try and address some of these things. In theory, maybe that's something we could consider. But we'll move on now to Amanda.
Thank you. Is this working? Yes. Well, I've got these points here. How can we get the spotlight back onto salt and bring the out-of-home sector in line with retail? If we look at the first one, how can we get the spotlight back onto salt? I've got several hats that I wear being here today, one of which is I write in the media, the mainstream media, and another is that I work as a consultant for a contract catering company who supply both schools and at-work venues. So I've got two parts of this that I'd like to just bring into my little piece today. How can we get the spotlight back on salt? I think it's incredibly important to listen to the statistics, which sadly Juliet has highlighted again, because they are horrifying when you actually take them just at face value. And we are distracted daily by fasting diets and high protein plans and detox this and low sugar that, and actually those are the plans which are backed by celebrities, which always get the coverage in newspapers, and actually what we want to do is get back to getting coverage on really serious issues like this. And very often the sort of styles of eating that are going to help people to lower their salt and lower their risk of stroke and heart disease and these issues that cause many deaths in the UK and disability every single day is to just eat a healthy, balanced diet. And people like me who've been around so long, bang on about this endlessly, and it's quite boring. So we need to find ways of attracting attention to it. And I think your press release today, the fact that you do this research and put it out there is incredibly important. So more of this, please, because it gives us really sensible pegs on which to hang stories. And also, where the food industry can make reductions in salt and then bring that to our attention. I know we've got wonderful dietitians here who work in the food industry and high street chains, and these are really, really important places to make changes and to bring to the press's attention. I remember years ago Raymond Blanc said to me, if we could just get McDonald's to make some small changes, that's going to make a huge difference to the health of the nation. I remember thinking he's mad, but actually of course he was completely right. Small changes in big chains make massive impacts at society level. So more of that, please, and please tell us in the press and we can report it. And what about changes in the out-of-home sector? Well, we know millions of people eat in at-work environments every day. We know millions of children eat at school. For the caterers who are supplying these venues, it's absolutely crucial that they look at what they're doing. And that can be really tricky, because where there are chefs in there making meals at the coalface every day, then they will have been doing that for many years. And they will have a way of doing it, and they will have their own threshold of seasoning that they think is a correct threshold of seasoning, and each one of those chefs will have an individual threshold. So what do we do about helping those chefs to make changes, the ones that are already out there? I think it's incredibly difficult, having worked in this environment for many years, but keeping on with the same old message is important. In the company that I consult to, it's called CH&Co, we have an active chef's nutrition training course. When I go into a room, sometimes the chefs are sitting there with their arms crossed and their backs overtly set against me, because they know they're going to hear things that they don't want to hear. But it's interesting, gradually throughout the day, arms begin to unfold and they become a little bit more interested, and then you start to talk about them. We're very lucky to have a young boy, he is young to me, he's in his 30s, called Rory Larkin, who's a qualified chef and has a degree in nutrition, so they tend to take him more seriously than me. But he starts to show them how you can make food well seasoned without having to put in too much salt. And those sort of changes on the ground are very, very important. They're slow, they're slightly tedious because they take time and effort, but also by using some of the salt alternatives for those chefs who are very entrenched in their ways and who just have an absolute habit of grabbing a handful of salt and putting it into a dish. If you have salt alternatives available where they can make the exchange pinch for pinch, but that exchange is like the smart salt, for example, is going to reduce the amount of sodium in that pinch, then that's another way of approaching salt reduction in those sort of environments. But what's absolutely crucial is then to look at the chefs who are coming up through the training system, because if you look at places like Westminster Kingsway, where they train some wonderful chefs come through their college, what they're now doing is having nutrition embedded into the chef's nutrition training courses. So those students are coming up, and where Rory will tell you an example where he trained at Westminster King, where if he had under-seasoned his dish, he would have been marked down for it. So his level of seasoning was here, we'd like to see it here, but those lads and the girls were being marked down if they didn't get to here. So we need to work at the training level, and we need to see those levels changed so that their expectations are changed for training, and they're not marked down for under-seasoning, perceived under-seasoning. So I think it's absolutely crucial that we get training out for all the further education colleges, so that new levels of salt, new thresholds of acceptable seasoning are put in place, and expectations are changed at that levels, because then those chefs come up. And then of course in the schools, contract caterers who are working in schools absolutely, I feel, have an obligation to have their level of seasoning at the lowest possible baseline, so that the children in the schools are having their expectations set at a certain level, and then to obviously encourage nutrition education wherever you can within schools, whether that's through Public Health England, having their courses running out through teaching, or actually contract catering companies such as the one I work for, and I know many others do as well, incredibly responsible, and they have assemblies for children. And those children are changing. 5 years ago, if I'd been in an assembly, the children wouldn't have known anything about salt or portions of fruit and vegetables. Their little ears are flapping now, they're really receptive, and they love hearing about it. So I feel, and certainly my experience, I was talking to Tim about this earlier, is if you start talking to children about the link between sustainability and nutrition, the two go very much hand in hand. Vegan ready meals aside, if you've got a chef who's actually making food from scratch, and you're talking to them about sustainability and good nutrition, you actually automatically start to get the nutrition right, and healthy eating sort of falls into place quite easily. And the levels of salt, they're aware that what they should be doing, and these are the children who are going to come up through the system and hopefully have lower expectations. So the whole sort of system starts to change, and the expectation starts to change. So there's lots to do. I think we have to have great stories coming through to make us aware of the situation still being appalling. We have to look at education of children, we have to look at education of chefs, and we have to just keep at it, because this is a crucial part of public health. And you know, we've had great examples in the past, and I think we've got to take heart from what was achieved, see and use that as a motivation to keep going.
We've got hundreds of microphones here. Thank you, Amanda. I agree completely, and among the many things you said there, let's make sure that we address how to get the attention, that question that is what was behind creation of this, basically, to try and ratchet it up and deliver. It's really important. Joe, Public Health England is going to tell us how it's all going to be okay now.
I'm not entirely sure that's what I'm going to say.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, as you all know, Public Health England oversees the reduction and reformulation programme on behalf of government, and work on salt reduction, which began in the UK back in 2004, moved over to PHE in 2017. So in March that year, we republished the 2017 salt reduction targets, which were originally developed under the Department of Health and Social Care's Public Health Responsibility Deal, and for the first time, those targets included specific targets for the eating out of home sector. So the 2017 targets cover around 76 specific food groups that contribute most to people's salt intakes, and then the additional targets for the out-of-home food are in 11 main product categories. So industry were due to meet these targets by the end of 2017, so December, and from our report, many of you will be aware that progress was mixed, with some targets being met and others having a long way to go. A key element of our reduction and reformulation programme is monitoring of progress. We are looking to do this in a consistent and transparent way. And in relation to salt reduction, when the work moved over to us, we needed to understand the full extent of the progress that had been made by all sectors of the industry towards meeting the 2017 targets. Given the number of subcategories and the number of targets, given that there are more than one target in a number of those subcategories, it was a challenge, but really important to us in terms of considering our advice to government on the next steps for the programme and how best to achieve further reductions in salt. Our report was published in December 2018, and that was the first time that a really comprehensive and detailed assessment of salt levels in foods against reformulation targets had been published in the UK. And just, I'm not going to bore you with all the numbers, but just in summary, for foods purchased for consumption in-home, so that's retailer, own label products and manufacturer branded products, just over half of the average salt reduction targets were met. And where maximum targets were set, 81% of products were at or below those targets. For the eating out of home sector, 71% of products overall were at or below maximum per serving targets, although it is recognised that the out of home targets were generally set at a higher level than the main salt targets. It was the first time they'd been introduced. And then we also did a separate analysis. So for foods in the 15 subcategories which contribute the most sodium to the diet, half of average targets were being met. So overall, quite a mixed picture in relation to achievement of the 2017 targets. However, looking at salt reduction as a whole, it's clear that there's been really significant progress in reducing the salt content of foods since salt targets were first set in 2006. So, for example, the average salt content of bread reduced by about 20% between 2001 and 2011, with reductions of more than 40% in other types of products. And another example is breakfast cereals. So they met 2017 targets according to our report, and those 2017 targets were set more than 25% lower compared with 2006 when they were first met. So there's been a stepwise lowering of salt targets for foods by up to 54%, if you look at the numbers, between 2006 and 2014, and over the same time period there's been a reduction in population salt intakes of 11%. Now we're waiting for new figures on those population salt intakes, which are due to be published later this month on the 25th of March, and those figures will show whether that type of progress has been sustained. So alongside our monitoring, we've been continuing to talk to businesses and other organisations to ensure continued action to reduce salt levels in foods and subsequently in population salt intakes. And across the reduction in reformulation programme as a whole, there's been a specific focus on engagement with the eating out of home sector. We have engaged with certain sectors based on sort of market share and, as Amanda was saying, in relation to those sort of top sellers where we can see that the most impact can come. So we've done that with coffee shops, with food service, with quick service and casual dining restaurants, and our most recent engagement is with travel and leisure food businesses. As set out in the government's Prevention Green Paper, published last summer, PHE are now working towards the publication of the next set of challenging salt targets. So these will be the fifth wave of targets, so we've had to consider the salt reduction progress that's already been made while continuing to encourage businesses to do more, which government clearly wishes to see. We've shared draft proposals for new targets with a range of stakeholders for comment, particularly on any technical challenges to further salt reduction. And obviously we'll take all of the feedback we receive into account in our final advice to ministers on what those salt targets should be. The new targets are set to be achieved by 2023, so once they've been published, we'll be monitoring businesses to check on their progress. Campaigns such as those by Action on Salt to highlight where change needs to happen are an important element in holding businesses to account, and our intention is that part of our monitoring on salt reduction going forwards will be an assessment of progress at business level towards meeting those salt targets. Finally, it's important to note that although most of the salt we eat is already in our food, as a recent campaign has shown, there are other actions needed to help meet the government's Prevention Green Paper ambition of a further reduction of 1 gram in intakes down to 7 grams a day. So we need consumers to use less salt in cooking or at the table and to check labels to make sure they're choosing those lower salt options. And government are looking at opportunities to work with other organisations, including the NHS, on how to provide this advice. We need public sector procurement, as Amanda was saying, to lead the way in reducing the salt content of what's available to their customers. And other actions like restrictions on advertising and promotion of foods that are high in fat, salt and sugar. And it's only by a combination of these actions and others that will move intakes closer to recommendations. So just to conclude, salt reduction remains a really important priority across our reduction and reformulation programme, and we greatly value, and we'll continue to work with Action on Salt to keep up the momentum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jo. I think while you were talking, I was just thinking about the role of PHE. It's in a difficult position. I can say this, you can't. It's in a difficult position because it's inside government but on the edge of government. It's advising government, but it isn't actually making the decisions. So it's in a very important but also very delicate position. I think you're absolutely right. The role of setting the targets, monitoring them is absolutely critical because of what, well, what we've all been saying and what Amanda and Juliet were saying. I was at the launch of the first salt titles, and I'll be frank, I think there was more verve then. The Food Standards Agency was really committed to trying to shake things up and do it. And in the sense we're in a difficult position now where, it's back to what you said, Amanda, well actually both of you said it, all three of you said it, we're part of the furniture now, isn't it? And so that makes it both good but also tricky. And the monitoring is very important, and that's why outside monitoring is so important. I think today's new survey, vegan and plant-based foods, is an example of that. But I think we've got to have quite an important internal debate about how we ratchet it up to address what you were saying, Amanda. So thank you for that, Joe. We still haven't got James Davis, but I think I'll recognise him when he comes in, so we'll allow him to interrupt. Does anyone have any questions? Any thoughts? I've been trying to lead on that. Can we pass it here? We're being recorded, so you have a lovely shot of the back of your head. Yeah, can you say who you are?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not too sure. Okay, now it's working. Just wondering, I mean, sort of like with catering services, there can be more influence, but sort of like with takeaways, because the usage or the intake of takeaways is on the increase. So how can this be controlled or influenced?
That's a very good question. I mean, all three of our speakers, if you notice, referred to the out-of-home market. Actually, it's fragmented. I was thinking that. I mean, I follow this with great interest. How can we make Deliveroo and Uber Eats more responsible for the fact that they now take almost as much money as farming does out of food? Did you know that? It's staggering. It's staggering. So, what do you, Amanda? Do you want to have a go at that?
Not really.
Hand it down the line, then I'll come to me.
I think it comes back to all the things. I think it comes back to so much of what you were saying about all the way down the line, and starting with the children. Not starting, but one of the key elements is the children, getting them to have lower expectations, the further education colleges, educating chefs, and having different expectations so that they get through their exams with different layers of salt required, levels of salt required. There are so many different parts to this, and that's my very small part to say on it, but that's absolutely crucial. But everybody else plays a really key part as well. And I'm going
to push you because I thought you rightly raised and celebrated Westminster Kingsway. It is good. I've watched that go from being a very boring, straight, bog standard French haute cuisine oriented catering college to becoming much more imaginative. I used to work at the northern equivalent of that, at Manchester Polytechnic, as it was at Hollings. And it's not happening all over the country. I go across North Wales and different parts of the country.
So, to note that the takeaways and delivery services are part of the engagement that we're doing with the out-of-home sector. One of the things we do obviously is trying to sort of think ahead and future-proof, and absolutely we hear it anecdotally. It is quite hard to get data, obviously we're all about the evidence. But we are engaging. When we engage, we do try and to engage at a senior level as we can to try and make sure that we're reaching the decision makers. And in terms of our programme, so the aim is for the providers to reduce levels of salt so that it's just happening and people don't know about it. So if we can influence, people have mentioned McDonald's, other restaurants which are featured in the Action on Salt survey, then where Deliveroo or Uber Eats are delivering that food, then it will have less salt in it. There are so many different messages, and this is so tied up with overall dietary messages. It's not just salt, is it? So our reduction reformulation programme covers salt, it covers sugar, there will be calorie guidelines, so we are hoping that sort of that consistent message and our ongoing engagement, and we have obviously had more plans for engagement with the out-of-home sector. It is the challenge around the fragmentation of it. We tend to work on the biggest providers where most of the sales are, so where most people are buying or getting their food from, because we don't have none of us have unlimited resources, so it's really important to try and have those influences, but it's also important to try and get those messages disseminated. So there are things like healthier catering guidance, which has got advice in about how to reduce salt for all different types of sort of local businesses. So we are always thinking about what more we can do, and I think particularly with salt, as you were saying, it's been around for a long time, so it is around a sort of refresh of what's available. And I think because it's been around for a long time, we think that everybody knows about it, but I'm not entirely sure that's true, especially in the eating out of home sector, because it's so fragmented. So one of the things we will be looking at, we'll get the salt targets published, is what more we can do to raise that awareness and how we can sort of reach it a bit more widely.
Okay. Now you asked this question. Are you happy with the answers?
Yeah.
She's happy with the answers. Excellent. Can you say who you are?
Hi there, I'm Caroline Klinger from Low Salt. We actually just did some consumer research just last week, and I think key to all of this is picking back up consumer awareness. Consumer awareness was at its height with regards to asking about how much salt was in food, like you said early on in the salt reduction programme, but what our research found was 9 out of 10 people do not know that the recommended intake of salt is 6 grams a day.
Is that what your survey found?
This is what our survey found. Our survey found 6 out of 10 people are or know somebody who is instinctively adding salt to food without tasting it. 1 in 5 people are adding salt in a restaurant prior to tasting food, and also a quarter of those 6 out of 10 people, that's equivalent to 10 million people, do not want to give up salt. So I think part of any effort we're making with manufacturers in the food service sector is raising public awareness, because the consumer will challenge the manufacturer and will challenge the out-of-home sector if they're asking for reduced sodium in their foods.
Catherine, have we ever done a survey of restaurants as to whether some do not even offer salt on the table? I think we did.
We did a few years ago.
And?
We did a restaurant survey as to whether it was available on the table, whether you had to ask for it. And I couldn't say necessarily that those that didn't have it on the table didn't also have very salty food in the first place. We find quite often it will be more higher end places that are less likely to have salt on the table. Maybe everyone saw Lenny Henry's Chef some time ago. But no, certainly there's a recommendation that people don't have it on the table, but that is not true. There's also a suggestion of having something like low salt available, or smaller sachets of salt that can make a difference as well.
Did you want to come back in, Joe? You looked like you were hovering, then Amanda.
Yes, so absolutely. When the salt reduction programme first started, back with the Food Standards Agency, one of the key elements of that was a consumer awareness campaign to raise exactly those messages around what intake should be. Sip the slug. Yes, absolutely. So that was a comprehensive programme, and there's some bits of evaluation which show that that element of it was effective. Where we are now, just to say the work that I'm talking about from PH's perspective is within the sort of reduction and reformulation programme. It's not to say that other work on sort of salt and awareness doesn't happen in other areas, they're just not my area. Obviously we do have marketing campaigns, so we have Change for Life and we have One You. There is obviously competition within those in terms of messages to get out. There is not currently or likely going to be loads of funding coming forward for those consumer awareness campaigns in terms of government. So actually, it's really important that everybody here who has the capability to include some of those messages in what they do, does it. Because it's only by everybody doing all of those things that we are eventually going to hopefully make that difference.
I'm going to really rudely interrupt and say, I hear you say that I'm not in PHE, in case you hadn't noticed. I think we can actually put pressure on government to say we should have those targets. And let me tell you why. It's because this government exists as a government, because it's one working class former Labour constituencies where the incidence of premature death through diet-related disease is highest. So in other words, they have an interest now, a very big interest, in trying to address the premature cause of death in the now northern true blue heartlands. I think we have a different politics.
And absolutely, in an ideal world, that's exactly what we'd all be
But
doing.
it is an ideal world where Brexit and free.
Good point. And I think that for salt, I think there are a lot of organisations, really good charities. Obviously, it's great the Stroke Association that are talking here today. I think there is an opportunity for PHE to work together, obviously, which is what we're looking to do with those other organisations. And it's about identifying the opportunities, using the resources we have in the most effective way. And obviously, we're fairly flat out working to get the salt targets published at the moment. But once they're out, and we've got this sort of period where we're encouraging businesses to do what they can do, we are also going to be looking at that wider piece along with government to help achieve that reduction by a gram, and then hopefully another gram following that. So absolutely, it's always part of what we think about, and absolutely, if you can lobby and make that happen, then fantastic.
Amanda, you want to come in?
No, not really, Tim. It was only to say.
Just waving.
It was just really that
She was so enthusiastic.
what we have to
she was
do.
waving.
Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever get back to Sid the Slug, was it? I don't think we'll ever get back to those
Does anyone
amazing.
remember Sid the Slug?
I do, yes.
It was a great campaign.
Yeah, it was.
actually.
But if we don't ever get back to those levels of funding for that kind of campaigning, then it makes it even more important that everybody at grassroots is doing absolutely they can. So the chefs, the contract caterers, the retail, everybody out of home is doing their absolute best to reduce salt at that level.
Yeah, point taken. Juliet, you wanted to come in.
Say a couple of things. I'm not surprised by the low
Salt consumer research. I mean, no one has a clue what 6 grams is either. I mean, if you say a teaspoon, everyone can kind of identify with that. But 6 grams it's just too complex for people. But I really wanted to reinforce the importance of us working in partnership. No one single organisation. Let's not. I mean, it's too easy to have a puppet government. It needs a collective effort and different organisations to be working in partnership to get consistent messages out there. And I do think we need to remember the power of social media. Social media is a really, really important channel for influencing public attitude, and I think there's probably more to do through social media.
Like what? Spell that out.
We'll just get the message out. I mean, so many people consume Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just some simple infographics, just some simple messages, I think could go a long way. I think we tend to think about traditional channels, which have limited reach. It is extraordinary how many people consume messages through social media, and I think we might be missing a bit of a trick by not thinking about it.
I agree, and I'm nodding at you, and I agree with what you also said about, it's not having a puppet government, it's a question of setting frameworks. And it's frameworks that are hard to get, I think. Do you want to come in?
I just have a question.
Say, wait till you've got the mic and say
Sorry.
who you are.
Hi, I'm Joe. I work on the National Food Strategy. So,
Does everyone know what the National Food Strategy is?
does everyone know what the National... Okay, so the National Food Strategy is an independent review led by Henry Dimbleby, the co-founder of Leon, and he also did the school meals plan with Michael Gove. It looks at the food system, and it looks at how we can keep what is good about the food system. So food is broadly affordable, though obviously there's food poverty and it exists in large sections of society. Food is safe. We don't die. In the UK, some of the lowest rates of food poisoning in the world. Hooray. However, there are unintended consequences of that, namely we are getting overweight and increasing rates of obesity and overweightness, carbon emissions, and also falling biodiversity. So the food system, the National Food Strategy, will look at how we can keep what is good about the system, keep complexity of supply chains, food security, all that stuff, then also tackle these unintended consequences and produce a food system that hopefully will be happy to leave our children.
So I'm going to embarrass Henry Dimbleby in person, i.e. you, and say, is salt going to not just be a footnote in the National Food Strategy, but actually part of the health programme? You're smart.
I'm going to duck that question. Because I'm not hearing when I don't know, because we're still working on our recommendations. We're working on part 1 of the report, and part 1 will look at, where are we now, and it will set out a vision of where we want to be. Part 2, which will come out in summer, will think about how we get from A to B. And so the recommendations and the kind of focus on salt, if it's there or not, will come in part 2, and we're still working out almost where we are. We're still writing part 1.
Juliet, you're grimacing, but I'm going to say I think you and Catherine should both write letters to the National Food Strategy and get his name and corral round him. Don't allow him out till his blood group and his bank balance has been taken. The microphone's been turned off. You're doing it. You're doing it. Very good.
I did have a question. I didn't. none of those are the answer to my question. None of. But yeah, please come and chat to me. I want to understand about one of the things that we are having public dialogues around the country, talking to people in Grimsby, in Kendal, in East Anglia, Lewisham, Bristol. One of the things that this is kind of personally for me from going to them that's coming out is the stress that people have in choosing their food, the complexity of the food environment that they experience. And there's a lot of information out there and people don't always know what to do with it. I wonder if there's any kind of thoughts about how salt and action on salt can work to, along with all the other messages that consumers have to appreciate and understand as part of the food system, to make that experience less stressful so people can make the right choices, but it's actually easier to make those choices for themselves, and the environment isn't as stressful to make food choices in.
I'm smiling at you because you're nicely teeing up. She's laughing, but I was having a go at Jo about exactly that, about how it's time we revise the Eat Well plate. So Jo, I'm going to not embarrass you.
Sorry, Jo.
No, that's okay, and I think that's the key reason that our programme is in existence is precisely to take away that decision making that adds to the individual stresses. If we can make a difference and reduce the salt levels in foods that people eat every day, they haven't got to think about it. So that's the sort of key aim of our programme. As I said, it's not the only thing that's going on. We all know that if everybody was following the Eat Well plate, we wouldn't have an issue with salt intakes, or less of an issue with salt intakes.
Environmental footprint.
That's a whole different discussion, and I think that's the challenge. There are so many different elements to all of this, and obviously the environment is such a key thing. So you will know through the government's childhood obesity plans, a lot of that is looking at the environment to try and change the environment so people aren't having to navigate as much through all of it. Obviously everyone still has to take their individual responsibility, but that's where we need this combination of things that are aimed at individuals in terms of what you can do today if you want to do something, and the stuff that's all happening behind the scenes to make it easier for everybody.
He's nodding. Are you happy? Yeah,
I mean, reformulation is absolutely key to delivering it, and I think that it's interesting when you talk to food industry, and it's kind of, especially within the retail sector, it's actually an area where voluntary targets have been successful, and I'm happy to kind of be debated on that and learn more about it. But there are successes within the retail sector. I'm just always. Yeah, I'm just struck by the amount of information out there, the confusion that currently exists, and whether or not adding more information to that is, the answer.
Did you want to come in, any of you? No?
This is a really important one.
It is, and I think it was Amanda that started off in the right way. It isn't complicated. Just eat a healthy, balanced diet, and the problem is that all the information that appears is not information that we're putting out that's making it more complicated. I generally don't think. And we talk about social media. If you look at the information that comes out from businesses and all of those sorts of things, it's this competing environment. So we do need to try and find a way of cutting through that. But it is really challenging. I'm sure we all find that. We were just talking earlier about how things get portrayed in the media. It's a real challenge. But there is. But that, again, as Amanda was saying, that message around a healthy, balanced diet, we keep saying it, but it's still a challenge to get that across.
Juliet, to come in.
I just wanted to add to that and just say, I think, keep it simple. I was referring earlier to the 15 million people wandering around with high blood pressure at risk of stroke, which accounts for a quarter of all deaths and is seriously disabling. I mean, nobody wants to have a stroke. But nobody understands the link between stroke and blood pressure. Even people who are on blood pressure medication don't understand that they might be at risk of stroke, and then people don't understand the relationship between salt and blood pressure. So I think there's just some simple sort of things that we all think are just so obvious that haven't been communicated in a kind of accessible way to the public.
I agree, well said. I think we spend a lot of time discussing the complexity of the eating environment and the immediate choice and the microenvironment. Rightly, there's attention on that. But there's this great big elephant in the room, death. These just massive death and disability figures are with us. They've improved slightly, but not a lot. And the class gradient is massive. I've just, Catherine has spent 2 years doing a book about British food security and really trying to think about where are we going as a country. Advertising. It's actually, I'm not supposed to speak about it because it's out in a fortnight. But that I was staggered. I was saying to Amanda, staggered, looking properly for the first time for about 5 years at Britain, only Britain. Our figures are shocking, actually. And how to make that connection. You know, we want more touchy-feely ecosystem stuff and microenvironment, but the outcomes, come on. Actually, the framework needs to change. But I'm a hardliner, I think. My mother always said I'd get more relaxed as I got older. Graham McGregor is my model. If you know what I mean. One more question. Are you wanting to stop?
I would like to pitch in if that's all right.
Oh, you're right. We've got two. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
And then cool.
So, generally, people...
Can you say who you are?
Oh, my name's Luqman.
Cameraman.
Yeah, I run a film business, but I'm also incredibly passionate about health, all sorts of things relating to lifestyle, diet, everything. So generally, if people eat too much salt, they should reduce that, and that's perfectly fine. But I think people neglect to think about one of the things that can reduce salt is exercise and sweat, right? Sweat is salty. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's just say somebody's morbidly obese. Why are they morbidly obese? Is it because there's more salt in bread? Not necessarily. It's because they don't have the discipline to exercise or to eat healthy in the first place. So lowering salt will make a difference, but having discipline is fundamentally what is going to make people more healthy and cause less deaths. That's my...
Oh, that's a big one.
Exercise.
No, nice. Okay, I think no one's going to disagree about exercise. I'm under pressure to win. Okay, say who you are.
Hi, I'm Helena Kipling. I'm from the British Heart Foundation. So my question was around, just as a final question, we've had some really interesting ideas from Public Health England and what Public Health England are doing with salt reformulation. We've had thoughts from everyone on the panel about the action they would like to see on salt reduction. The target we're looking at the moment is 7 grams, which is great. It's really good to see that commitment in the French and Green paper. However, the recommended intake is 6 grams, and the World Health Organization recommendation to reduce risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart attack is 5 grams. So my question for the panel is, what one action would you like to see that will help us reach that longer term goal of 7 grams in the short term, medium term, but also down to 6 eventually?
I thought you said 5.
Oh yeah, I get 5.
Come on,
depends whether you're going UK or
Amanda, you go first.
Well, one of
Hello. One of the things I'd like to do is to stop talking about recommended intakes of salt. That's the maximum level we should be talking about. And I always correct my editors. I say, no, it's not a recommended intake, it's the maximum. So one of the things I'd like to see is just the rephrasing of that. We need to talk about the fact these are maximum levels. These aren't what we should be aiming for, the same way that vitamin C or iron or vitamin D. This is the maximum. And then hopefully people will aspire to even less. And Joe, I did write to your organisation, I emailed you to say, do you need any help? They didn't get back to me, so can you just put that forward?
Always embarrass the person in public. Very good. Next.
I'm just going to say 2 things. First one, really glibly, is just get the message out that salt's bad for you. Reduce your intake, cut it out, it can be deadly. And the second thing on the physical activity side, the Stroke Association is part of a coalition of charities called the Richmond Group, and we are working in partnership with Sport England to communicate the message that even if you're living with long-term conditions and you have disabilities, physical activity is possible, and it's good for you. And we're running a campaign at the moment which is on TV and social media called We Are Undefeatable, which has fantastic videos of people with long-term conditions showing how possible it is to just take small amounts of exercise to increase your physical and mental well-being.
The bad news at the moment is oil price has come down, which is going to incentivise people to get into their cars. We really want oil well over £100 a barrel, I mean, so that they're forced to walk to work. Did you read the advice from the 1918 flu epidemic? It was don't go on public transport, walk. Well, that's actually easier said than done. You know, people live further and further away from where their kids go to school or nursery or where they're between home and work. We've restructured the built environment to make it hard to take exercise every day. So meantime, it's sport.
Shall I just
Comment on that, what one action, and I think the answer to that is, the problem is there isn't that one action, and I know I've already said it. If people were eating better diets generally, then we would have more people who aren't eating more, absolutely, than that maximum of 6 grams, which is what the UK recommendation is at the moment. We know that from the survey, and we'll have the updated figures later in the month, about a third of people were sort of hitting that, so obviously we want to try and increase that percentage. So obviously the average salt intakes take into account women and men, and there's reasons why it's at 8. So it isn't just the one action, and I think that's the advantage of having sort of, you know, variety of people in the room and this sort of working together, which we're all looking to do as much as possible because it's the best way to make use of all the resources we've got. So yeah, it would be lovely if there was one thing, but unfortunately not.
She's nodding, but she's grimacing. Very good, exactly the right response. I hope I'm not misreading you. Any last minute burning questions? We're here, but we're supposed to be booted out, I think. But the most important thing you have to do is to eat all the food, otherwise there's waste. And drinking. Okay, very good. Look, I'd like to thank the speakers. Really fantastic. It's very, really interesting and good points and good debate, and thank you very much. And thank Catherine and the team and Graham for putting this on again, and thank you for coming. I think that's it, isn't it? We're all over, that's it. Sonia.
Just to say, there is still some food and drink, and there's been networking until 3 o'clock until we have to leave, so don't run off just yet. Stick around, carry on the conversation.
Don't allow him out of the room.
Yes, it's over here. Oh, we do, yes. It was Joe. I've got your email. We've also got some forms at the back there, actually, if you're interested in joining the conversation. Just put in your email, we can always give it back to you.